You've been trying to unlock your energy from the wrong direction. You've been told to raise your vibration by thinking positive, to unlock your potential by visualizing success, to master your mind, because that's the secret to mastering your life. But what if all of that doesn't actually work? What if the reason you still feel stuck is because you skipped the one place where real transformation begins? Not your mind, not your mindset, your body. More specifically, a part of your body you've likely never been taught to move, to feel, or even to notice. It's where your frequency isn't just imagined, it's generated. And no, this isn't going to be another affirmation video. It's not a mindset trick or a manifestation hack. This is about reactivating something way more primal, something powerful, something ancient. We're talking about 5 forgotten body-based movements that don't just improve your mood, they shift your entire signal. And here's the thing, you don't need to believe anything. You just need to move the part of you that's always known. These movements aren't new, but what happens when you do them? That's the magic. Underneath all the noise, under the stack of self-help books, podcasts, morning routines, and mindset resets, there's something no one's talking about. A part of you so foundational that every real transformation depends on it. And yet, in almost every modern teaching on healing, manifestation, or awakening, it's missing. Not because it's irrelevant, but because it's too real, too powerful, too close to the truth. At the base of your spine is a bone called the sacrum. Now, most people have never given it a second thought. Doctors treat it like just another part of your skeleton. Anatomy charts slap a label on it and move on. But ancient civilizations, they treated it very differently. In Egypt, it was symbolized by the jade pillar, the energetic spine of resurrection and stability. In Taoist traditions, it marks the location of the lower dantian, your core reservoir of vital life force. In Afro-diasporic cultures, it's where rhythm begins, the drumbeat of your body's intelligence. These weren't just poetic metaphors. This was science before science had words for it. The sacrum is the first bone to form in the human fetus and the last to decompose after death. It shields the base of your nervous system. It connects directly to your pelvic floor. It holds the cradle for your cerebrospinal fluid, the liquid that carries energetic signals from your body to your brain and back. It's not just bone, it's vibration, it's memory, it's a gateway. And when it stays frozen, your energy does too. Here's the truth. Modern life has conditioned you to ignore this part of yourself, to sit still, to suppress your hips, to think of the pelvis as just functional, or worse, as something to be ashamed of. You've been taught that movement is something you do at the gym or on a dance floor, not something sacred, not something intelligent. But ancient initiates didn't begin their spiritual practices with silence. They started with rhythm, with breath, with grounded, intentional movement. Because they knew something modern culture forgot, you can't raise your consciousness if your foundation is frozen. And guess what? That's exactly how the system likes it. A still body is a controllable body. A disconnected body is easy to predict, easy to market to, easy to manage. So we're sold a version of spirituality that lives only in the head. Ideas, books, podcasts, mindset theories. But no breath, no hips, no pulse. Because the moment you start to move from the base of your spine, you don't just feel different, you become different. Your frequency shifts. Your reality starts to respond. This is the truth that doesn't go viral. The truth that's too potent for most platforms, which is why we go deeper inside our free Insights Academy newsletter. We even gift you a free digital copy of the Kybalion when you join. You'll find the link in the description. But right now, let this land. The sacrum doesn't need you to understand it. It needs you to remember it. Because movement isn't just about muscles, it's about messages. There are codes locked in the base of your body that no mantra will ever reach. You can meditate for hours, but if your sacrum stays frozen, so does your signal. That anxiety you feel? That sense that something's off or missing? That's your energy trying to rise, but the gate is shut, and the gatekeeper is your sacrum. There's a reason it was called sacred, not as a poetic flourish, not as a metaphor, but because the people who moved with it, who knew it, understood what it unlocked: presence, power, pulse. This isn't about flexibility. It's not about aesthetics. It's not about looking good. It's about vibrating differently. Because when you move the sacrum with intention, you don't just change how you feel, you change what you attract. You start to operate like a tuning fork, not a passive receiver. You stop reacting to the world, and you start commanding it. Reality begins to take your shape. And nobody talks about this. Why? Because you can't bottle it. You can't monetize it. It doesn't look cute on an Instagram reel. It's raw. It's personal. It's embodied. And that's why it works. This isn't spiritual theater. It's not about staging the perfect meditation or chasing another level of mindset mastery. It's about remembering that the part of you that's most divine was never disconnected from source to begin with. You don't need to go up to find your power. You need to go down. Into the hips, into the rhythm, into the bone that holds the original code. You've been told to raise your vibration, but what does that actually mean? For most people, it's become another vague slogan, something you try to do with playlists and vision boards and crystal grids. You close your eyes, try to think high-vibe thoughts, and maybe it sort of works for a moment, until life crashes back in, and with it, the friction, the doubt, the numbness. So what do? You try harder. More visualization, more mental control, more positive affirmations. But what if the problem isn't your thoughts? What if it's that your frequency isn't in your head at all? Your vibration doesn't live in your mind. It lives in your body, more specifically in how your body moves, or how it doesn't. Energy isn't raised by effort. It's raised by rhythm, and rhythm lives in motion, not in theory. You can think beautiful thoughts all day long, but if your sacrum is locked, your signal is static. You're not broadcasting clarity. You're broadcasting noise. And here's the kicker. The universe doesn't respond to your goals. It responds to your state. And your state isn't defined by your words. It's defined by your vibration. Your body is not a vessel you carry around while your mind tries to ascend. Your body is the altar, and your sacrum is where the current begins. At the very base of your spine sits your personal drum, an energetic pulse that syncs with every memory, every emotion, every instinct. This is why movement is not just physical. It's not just exercise. Movement is message. Every sway, a signal. Every breath, a broadcast. And when you start moving from the base, when your sacrum begins to pulse, everything starts to shift. Not just how you feel, but how life responds to you. This isn't theory. It's physiology. When the sacrum moves in conscious patterns, through breath, spirals, rhythm, it starts to influence the flow of cerebrospinal fluid. That's the liquid highway running from your spine to your brain. It regulates mood, memory, perception, even intuition. It's not just liquid, it's transmission. And it responds to vibration. Stillness has its place, but unconscious stillness, the kind that's been forced by fear, trauma, or culture, that becomes stagnation. And stagnation isn't spiritual, it's shutdown. Your nervous system isn't waiting for affirmations. It's not waiting for your mindset to catch up. It's waiting for safety. And safety doesn't come from silence, it comes from motion. Subtle, grounded, intuitive, honest, a kind of movement that says to the body, we're not trapped, we're not frozen, we're not waiting anymore. That's why the most powerful healing doesn't always look profound. Sometimes it looks like a simple sway, a figure eight with the hips, a breath deep enough to rock the spine. These aren't performances, they're recalibrations, and they begin at the base. The sacrum is like a key, but not the kind you turn, the kind you tune. And once you tune it, once your body starts to hum at a new frequency, something shifts. Your presence changes. Your thoughts get quieter, more precise. Your decisions stop coming from chaos and start rising from clarity. You don't chase alignment anymore. You embody it. And here's the beautiful part. The world notices, not because you say anything, but because your signal is different. Conversations shift. Opportunities appear. People respond to you in a new way. Why? Because you're no longer broadcasting from confusion or trying to manifest from effort. You're broadcasting from coherence. And no, that's not magic. That's bioelectric truth. This is why so many people get stuck in the spiritual loop. They're trying to manifest from the head. But manifestation isn't about visualizing harder. It's about becoming a resonant field that draws it in naturally. And when the sacrum wakes up, that's exactly what happens. Your body becomes that field. A low, steady hum of clarity. A rooted signal that doesn't beg or chase. It simply declares, I'm not trying to become, I already am, and I move like it. And here's the best part. You don't need to be a dancer. You don't have to be flexible. You don't even have to know what you're doing. You just have to feel. Let your base move. Let it wake up. Let it remember its rhythm. Because once the body begins to move this way, intentionally, instinctively, it doesn't just change internally. It reorganizes your external reality. Your vibration? It's not a metaphor. It's a command. And the moment you start moving it with awareness, the world listens. From the time we were young, we were told, your mind is the control center. Master your thoughts. Control your emotions. Success starts in the brain. And yet, so many brilliant minds are still suffering. So many people who know all the right techniques and concepts still feel stuck, frozen, out of sync. Because the truth, the mind isn't the origin. It's the echo chamber. It responds to what the body is doing. Your posture, your breath, your rhythm, all of it feeds your nervous system first. Only then does the mind follow. Thought is not the root of change. Sensation is. The more you disconnect from your body, the louder and more chaotic your thoughts become. And we've built a whole culture around that. One that worships the mental, but neglects the physical. That's not a coincidence. It's by design, because the more disconnected you are from your body, the easier you are to manipulate. You're easier to control, easier to market to, easier to direct. But when the body is fully alive, fully present, it becomes unpredictable. It senses manipulation. It resists conformity. It remembers truth. That's why every system of power, society, religion, education, has always tried to control one thing first, the body. Still hips, rigid posture, restricted breath. Because when you suppress movement, you suppress memory. And when you suppress memory, you suppress identity. This is especially true at the base, the sacrum, the pelvis, the root. It's not just the foundation of your spine. It's the foundation of your energetic identity. And yet, look at most spiritual teachings today, obsessed with the crown, with the third eye, as if enlightenment lives only above the neck. But what good is an open third eye? If your root is frozen, what kind of clarity comes through a system with no grounding? Light without grounding is dissociation. You don't awaken, you drift. You float away from the very place transformation begins. Real awakening isn't about how high you go. It's about how deep you can feel. That's why the earliest spiritual practices didn't start with silence. They started with movement, with breath, with grounding. People didn't try to escape their bodies. They moved into them. They didn't seek answers in thought. They listened for rhythm. Because they understood something we've forgotten. The body holds what the mind forgets, especially the parts that have been shamed, hidden, or dismissed, especially the sacrum. The sacrum isn't just a bone. It's a memory bank. It stores the moments you were told not to speak, not to move, not to express. The moments when you didn't feel safe, in your body, in your truth, in your rhythm. And here's the wild part. It also holds the key to reversing that shutdown. Not through more thinking, not through better affirmations, but through presence, through movement. When you start to bring awareness to this part of your body, when you breathe into it, when you move from it, not as a performance, but as a ritual, something changes. It doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives as the softest shift, a subtle sense of ease, a little more breath, a deeper exhale, a nervous system that whispers, "I'm here, I belong, I'm safe to exist in this body." And that is the real beginning, not a new concept, a new sensation. But here's the tricky part, most people miss it. Why? Because they're looking for something that makes sense, instead of something that makes contact. Awakening isn't intellectual, it's vibrational, and when the base of your body starts vibrating differently, your mind follows. Thoughts become clearer, desires become simpler, fears lose their grip, not because you solved them, but because the signal that was feeding them changed. There's nothing wrong with your mind. It's brilliant. But it was never meant to lead. It was meant to translate, to support, to refine what your body already knows. And when you stop trying to force your way into clarity through the head and start listening to the base, you realize something radical. You were never blocked. You were just bypassing the doorway. And that doorway is where your spine meets the earth, where your rhythm returns, where your movement begins. Before there were books, there was rhythm. Before there were books, there was rhythm. Before there were temples, there were bodies, moving under open skies in sacred spirals. Long before enlightenment became a brand, ancient traditions knew the truth. The body was never a distraction from spiritual awakening. It was the spiritual awakening. They didn't separate spirit from flesh. They didn't see the body as something to transcend. They saw it as the path. And you don't have to look far for proof. In Egypt, the jade pillar wasn't just some mystical symbol. It literally represented the spinal column. With the sacrum at its base, it was a symbol of resurrection, of divine stability, of presence rising from the ground, upward. It was placed on tombs and temple walls, not for decoration, but as a vibrational code, a reminder of the vertical current, from root to crown, from earth to cosmos. And it wasn't activated by reading about it. It was activated through ritual, through motion, through alignment. In Taoist inner alchemy, the story is the same. The foundation of transformation begins at the lower dantian, right at the sacrum and pelvic region. This is where qi, life force, is cultivated, where breath meets intention. Every practice, qigong, tai chi, internal martial arts, starts there, not with the mind, with grounding, with movement born from the hips. Why? Because if you want to move energy, you don't start at the top, you start at the source. And in Afro-diasporic traditions across West Africa and the Americas, movement is prayer. The hips aren't passive, they're the drum. The beat isn't just heard, it's embodied. These cultures didn't write spiritual texts, they danced them. They didn't worship through stillness, they worshipped through rhythm. The pelvis wasn't taboo. It was sacred, because that's where presence begins. That's where generational memory lives. That's where healing pulses up from the ground and rises through the spine. Even the Hermetic tradition, the one that gave us the Kabbalion, speaks in codes that the body knows how to translate. As above, so below. It's not just a mystical idea, it's anatomical. What's happening above, in your mind, can only mirror the truth if the base is awake. And rhythm, another Hermetic principle, it's not something you think, it's something you feel, something you move with. But over time, something changed. These traditions, these embodied ways of knowing, were either erased, commodified, or sterilized. Colonial systems called them primitive. Religious systems labeled them sinful. Modern systems dismissed them as unnecessary. And little by little, we were taught that stillness was spiritual. That silence was superior. That movement was indulgent. The body became shameful. The hips were hidden. The sacrum, just another bone on a medical chart. But the knowledge didn't die. It just went underground. It lived in dancers who never studied, in grandmothers who swayed while cooking, in kids who couldn't help but move when music hit. It lived in rebels who couldn't sit still during sermons. In breath, in rhythm, in resistance. The truth is, your body has always known. It's always remembered. But you were trained to ignore the remembering, to sit still, to behave, to stay in your head and call it awakening. But now, something in you is stirring, a knowing that maybe the way forward isn't up or out, it's down and in. Into the rhythms you were told to tame, into the bones you forgot to move. This isn't about stealing from ancient cultures. It's about returning to what your own blood already understands. Because this knowledge, it's not exotic, it's ancestral, it's yours. It doesn't matter where you're from. Every culture at some point had its rhythm, its root practices, its sacred movements. What we call esoteric today was once everyday truth. What we call alternative was once obvious, and what we now dismiss as too simple was once known to be the most powerful. The sacrum was never meant to be studied. It was meant to be moved, and through that movement, a different kind of knowledge wakes up, not conceptual, cellular, not memorized. Felt. This is the real point, not a return to ancient history, but a return to internal coherence. To remember, your body isn't slowing down your spiritual growth. Your body is your spiritual growth, waiting to be reactivated. And no, you don't have to believe in energy to feel it. You don't have to chant in Sanskrit. You don't have to sit still for hours to access your essence. Because beneath all the distractions, all the conditioning, all the noise of modern life, there's a rhythm inside you that's not waiting to be invented. It's waiting to be remembered. And the moment you let yourself move, even a little, in the way your body already knows how to move, something clicks. Not mentally, viscerally. And reality begins to shift, not as a result of effort, but as a reflection of alignment. There are movements so simple, they're easy to overlook. But inside them are ancient codes, subtle rituals of power, carried in the hips, in the breath, in the bones. And when done with intention, not as a performance, but as a reconnection, they become sacred. Your body doesn't need instructions, it just needs space. To move how it was always meant to move, in spirals, in waves, in quiet pulses of life, rising up from the ground, realigning your entire field. And there's a reason this was buried, mocked, shamed, because it reconnects you with something the system can't profit from, your sovereignty, your inner knowing, your creative frequency. And here's the thing, you can't fake that, you can't buy it, you can only embody it. And once you do, life doesn't just respond, it reorganizes. It's easy to dismiss movement as mystical or metaphorical. But what ancient traditions encoded in ritual, modern science, is starting to explain in biological terms. These aren't symbolic gestures. They're actual interventions, neurochemical, neurological, electrical, not belief-based, body-based. They don't operate on imagination. They operate on anatomy. At the base of your spine is a network of tissue, fluid, and nerve pathways that regulate everything from your immune system to your mood. And the star of the show, cerebrospinal fluid. It bathes your brain and spinal cord, cushions it, cleanses it, transmits biochemical signals across your entire nervous system. And it moves in direct response to how your sacrum moves. So here's the key. When the sacrum rocks, gently, rhythmically, cerebrospinal fluid gets pumped upward. That motion nourishes the brain. It stabilizes your internal state. It supports emotional clarity, energetic flow, and mental balance. But when your sacrum stays still for too long, that flow stagnates. And when your fluid stagnates, so do you. This is why certain healing modalities, like craniosacral therapy or somatic breathwork, have exploded in popularity. They don't manipulate the mind. They stimulate the tides inside your body. What Taoists call qi, what mystics call the rising inner flame, modern science is beginning to understand as fluid dynamics and vagus nerve stimulation. Because it turns out, the sacred and the scientific were never in conflict. We just didn't have the tools to measure what our ancestors already knew. Take the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in your body. It runs from your brainstem all the way down to your abdomen, connecting your heart, lungs, and digestive organs. It governs your parasympathetic nervous system, the part that controls your ability to rest, digest, and heal. And here's the fascinating part. You don't activate the vagus nerve by thinking. You activate it through rhythm, through breath, through vibration. So when you move your sacrum with intention, when you spiral your hips or pulse through your breath, your vagus nerve lights up, your heart rate drops, your stress hormones lower. Your body begins to process emotions that were once trapped. You don't just feel calmer, you become more coherent. Researchers like Dr. Stephen Porges and Dr. Bessel van der Kolk have shown how trauma lives in the body, not just as memories in the brain, but as breath patterns, posture, and muscle tension. And more importantly, they've shown that healing doesn't come from insight alone. It comes from felt safety, from somatic engagement, from rhythm. Exactly what's activated in the 5 body-based movements you're learning now. Even in the realm of neuroscience, figures like Dr. Joe Dispenza have mapped how physical practices tied to breath and intention can induce advanced neurochemical states. His work with the pineal gland and how cerebrospinal fluid pressure influences altered perception mirrors what yogic and hermetic systems have hinted at for centuries. When the base of the spine begins to pulse in coherence, energy naturally rises toward insight, toward creativity, toward clarity. This isn't pseudoscience, it's the biology of transformation. Because your body isn't just flesh, it's a frequency regulator, a bioelectric field, a vibrational instrument. And the sacrum? It's the root note. When you play it right, the whole system starts to harmonize. But here's the catch. None of this works in theory. You can understand every word, memorize every fact, study every paper. But if you don't move, nothing changes, because your body doesn't respond to knowledge. It responds to experience. And these 5 movements, they don't just teach your body. They tune it. They create an immediate physiological shift. You don't need to wait for healing. You don't need to earn awakening. You don't need permission. You just need to step into the rhythm. The rhythm where healing is no longer an effort. It's the default. Where awakening isn't something you chase. It's a natural consequence of your coherence. So when you sway your hips in a figure 8, when you pulse your breath through your pelvis, when you spiral your awareness deep into the base of your spine, you're not just doing something spiritual. You're participating in the orchestration of your biology. You're telling your nervous system, it's safe now. You're informing your cells, we're no longer stuck. You're reminding your essence, the body is back online. And that is the real gift of science meeting spirit. Not to reduce the mystical into something clinical, but to validate what your body has always known. You don't have to choose sides, you just have to listen. And when you do, when you feel the pulse return, you realize something so simple, it's almost too easy to miss. The body isn't waiting for a miracle, it is the miracle. And it all begins with your sacrum. Even when the truth is simple, most people don't act on it. Not because they don't believe it, but because something deeper inside them resists. And this is where the real work begins. Not in learning something new, but in unlearning everything that taught you to fear what's already inside you. Because it's not the movement itself that's hard, it's what the movement might reveal. It's the vulnerability of reconnecting with a part of your body that you were told to ignore, control, or hide. For many, the pelvis isn't just a body part, it's a storage unit of shame, of trauma, of cultural programming, of silence. From a young age, we're told, sit still, be polite, don't wiggle, don't sway, especially not from the hips. Subtle, expressive, intuitive movement is often labeled as inappropriate, undisciplined, too much. So we freeze, we hold tension in our base, and over time, we stop listening to our own body. The hips lock. The sacrum goes quiet, the rhythm gets muted, and eventually, we stop receiving signals altogether. The body waits, silently, until something, a crisis, a breakthrough, or maybe just a quiet moment of clarity, calls you back to it. That's why so many people struggle to get into alignment, to feel their energy, to manifest anything real. It's not because they're doing it wrong, it's because they're trying to do it all from the neck up. But the body is still offline, and when you ask someone to breathe into their hips or to move their sacrum with awareness, what often comes up first isn't energy, it's discomfort, not physical discomfort, but emotional. A feeling of unfamiliarity, awkwardness, maybe even fear. Why? Because this is where we've stored all the parts of ourselves we were never allowed to feel. All the moments we silenced our instincts, all the truths we were taught to shrink. But here's what you have to remember. That discomfort, it's not a problem. It's the doorway. It's the sign that you're getting close to something real. And the answer isn't to push through it with force, or to fake confidence and keep performing. The answer is to soften into it, to give yourself permission to move, even if it's subtle, even if it's awkward, even if it brings up emotions you can't explain. Especially then. Because what you're doing isn't just movement, it's recovery. You're reclaiming the parts of yourself that were shut down, and when they start to move again, your power returns with them. And this is why most people don't follow through, not because they're lazy, not because they don't care, but because they don't want to feel. And real movement, the kind that changes your frequency, is not mechanical. It's emotional. It brings you back to your body, not as an object, but as a home. A place where all the parts you've run from are still waiting, patiently, to be integrated. And when you finally go there, when you cross that threshold, what you find isn't chaos, it's clarity. You realize the body isn't dangerous, the hips aren't wild, the sacrum isn't inappropriate, they're sacred. That movement you once hesitated to make starts to feel natural, not as something you're inventing, but as something you're remembering. And this is exactly why society never taught you this. Because a person who moves with presence is a person who can't be controlled. They feel too much. They sense manipulation. They know when something's off. And they don't need anyone's permission to shift. Movement, when done from the inside out, awakens an intelligence no institution can replicate. It makes you less dependent, more attuned, harder to manipulate, easier to trust. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The fear isn't that the movement won't work. The fear is that it will. Because once you feel your base, your rhythm, your sacrum, you can't go back. You can't keep pretending. You can't sit through things that feel false. You lose tolerance for anything that doesn't feel aligned. You stop outsourcing your authority. And that kind of power, it doesn't make you louder. It makes you quieter, more rooted, more clear, more unshakable. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about reclaiming who you've always been, not broken, just buried. And the deeper you go, the more natural it feels to move, to breathe, to be. Until one day, you're not trying to awaken anything. You've simply returned to the rhythm that was always yours. At some point in this process, something shifts. Movement stops being a technique and starts becoming a conversation. You're no longer asking your body to perform. You're asking it to speak. And if you listen, truly listen, it will. Not in words, but in pulses, in sensations, in rhythm. And in that space, something else begins to emerge. Something no book, no guru, no program can truly teach you. Creator mode, not as a concept, but as a frequency. It's not something you strive to activate. It's something you step into. It doesn't require effort. It requires alignment. And this frequency, it's not rare. It's just suppressed. It's the natural hum of a body in harmony with itself. a being no longer performing for the world, but vibrating from within. Most teachings miss this. They focus on mindset. They talk about discipline. They glorify stillness and structure. All while your body, the very thing that carries your frequency, remains frozen. Your sacrum was never designed to be static. It was meant to sway, to spiral, to pulse with life. And when you return to that pulse, everything begins to unfold. Creativity that once felt blocked starts to pour through you, not as forced ideas, but as energy moving through you. Emotions that used to overwhelm you begin to shift, not because they've been solved intellectually, but because they're finally being felt. You become less reactive, more responsive, less scattered, more rooted. And the people around you? They feel it. They notice a difference, not because you've said anything, but because your signal has changed. This is the creator state. Not a fantasy, not a goal, but a return to your natural coherence. It's where your thoughts, emotions, and movements are no longer fighting each other, but flowing together, because your body is no longer in contradiction. When the sacrum pulses, the heart softens. When the spine breathes, the mind quiets. When the hips spiral, your voice clears. This is your internal circuitry coming back online. And no, it's not linear. There will be days you forget, days you disconnect, days you go numb again. But now you know the way back. And that knowing, that's everything. Because transformation doesn't happen through perfection. It happens through your capacity to return, to remember, to move, even when it feels hard, to sway, even when the world wants you still, to pulse, even when your conditioning says suppress. These small acts of presence, they dissolve the system. Not just the one out there, but the one inside you. That's when movement becomes more than healing. It becomes devotion. A prayer with no words, a ceremony without script. Each breath, each pulse, each spiral, a declaration, I am here, I am home. Not because you reached some spiritual milestone, not because you became enlightened, but because your body remembered its own rhythm. And you had the courage to listen. For those of you who've been doing the work, silently, patiently, trying to reclaim your truth in a world that worships noise and numbness, know this: the body keeps everything. The joy, the grief, the moments you gave too much, the times you betrayed yourself, the truths you held but never spoke. It remembers all of it, but it also remembers how to come back. That memory, the one beneath your pain, beneath your fear, beneath the story, it's older, it's wiser, it's encoded in your bones, and it's waiting to be moved, waiting to be felt, waiting for you to remember what you've always been, not broken, not blocked, not behind, just buried. And now, finally, beginning to rise. There is power in this return, but not the kind of power you've been sold, the loud kind, the performative kind, the kind that needs validation. This is a different power, a quiet, rooted, unshakable presence, one that can't be faked, one that no one can take from you. It doesn't live in your words, it lives in your field, in your frequency, in your ability to stay with yourself, no matter what. And when you live from this place, everything begins to shift. Not because the outside world has changed, but because the world inside you is finally aligned. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to prove anything. You only need to move with the kind of presence that rewrites your entire signal. The body doesn't need permission to be sacred. It already is. And when you start treating it like that, when you move from that truth, you become something the system can't predict. Unshakable. But here's the thing. You've been trained, maybe even rewarded, for doing the opposite. You've been conditioned to intellectualize your pain, medicate your disconnection, distract yourself from the wisdom underneath it all. But all along, the answer has been just beneath the surface. Rhythmic, ancient, free. And this is your invitation to come back to it. Not once, not just when it's convenient, but again and again and again, until it becomes your default. At the end of all the seeking, after the books, the podcasts, the workshops, there's really only one question left. Can you feel yourself again? Not as a concept, not as a persona, not as an identity, but as a presence, a pulse, a rhythm. Because you're awakening. It was never meant to come from outside of you. It was always encoded in your body, in movements too subtle for language, in signals too ancient for words, and it begins not with knowing, but with remembering. Remember this: your spine is not just a stack of bones, it's an antenna. Your hips are not just joints, they're drums. Your sacrum isn't just a bone, it's the altar, the root site of your awareness. And the moment you start treating these places as sacred, your life shifts, not with a bang, but with a tremor, with a breath, with a micro-movement that whispers, "I'm listening now." That's what creator mode really is, not a reward, not an achievement, a restoration. It's not something you get, it's something you allow. It's the moment you stop performing the version of yourself the world prefers and start embodying the version that life itself designed. The one who doesn't need to control everything, because they are so deeply coherent that even chaos can't shake them. And yes, the system we were born into wants you to forget this, because it thrives on disconnection. It profits from your numbness. It depends on you not feeling. That's why it teaches you to sit still when you need to sway, to stay quiet when you need to roar, to perform certainty when what you really need is presence. But the moment you remember, the moment you move your hips not as rebellion, but as a return, you stop playing the role of the broken seeker and start embodying the architect of your own frequency. Does that mean life becomes perfect? No, but it becomes true. You learn to stay with yourself when emotions rise. You learn to trust what your body knows before your mind can explain it. You learn that movement is a language your spirit has been trying to speak to you all along. And that's when the real magic begins. Not the magic of wish lists or vision boards, but the magic of embodiment, of alignment, of creating from a state where nothing is missing. You didn't come here to follow someone else's script. You didn't come here to be a product of systemized distraction. You came here to feel, to move, to create, in a way only your body can allow. Creator mode isn't activated by hype. It's activated by rhythm. It's in the stillness between pulses, in the sway of your base, coming back online. So as you move through your life from here, don't just ask, "What do I want?" Ask, "How does my body want to move through this moment?" Because that one question, that simple shift in awareness, can change your entire day, and eventually your entire life. The more you honor that pulse, the more you begin to access a blueprint that's been buried beneath your conditioning. A map that doesn't need words. A path that was always felt before it was ever understood. You don't have to figure it all out. You just have to keep returning to the signal. That's the practice. That's the work. That's the freedom. And if you've made it this far, you already know. This isn't just content. This is initiation. You're not here to be entertained. You're here to remember. So if you're ready to go deeper, deeper into what we can't always say here, don't wait. Join the Insights Academy, our free newsletter for those walking the path of embodiment and truth. We send out weekly transmissions to help you strip away illusion and return to power. And as a thank you, you'll get a free digital copy of the Kabbalion, not as a reward, but as the next layer your system is ready to unlock. You don't need permission to activate creator mode. You just need a pulse. And that pulse, it's always been yours, waiting, listening, at the base of your spine. So move with it. Trust it. Build from it. Because the real revolution doesn't start in the mind. It starts when you reclaim the temple you live in, and you remember what it was always meant for, to carry rhythm, to transmit frequency, to speak your truth without needing to explain it. If this video resonated with you, drop a comment below. I understood it. Not to signal that you've learned something new, but to declare that you've remembered something ancient, because the moment your body begins to move in this way, you're not just changing your mood. You're not just feeling better. You're reorganizing reality, and that's not hype. That's not magic. That's what happens when you live as a being in rhythm. A vessel in motion. An instrument of presence. You stop chasing energy, and you start generating it. Effortlessly, naturally, honestly. So the next time the world tells you to get your mind right, remember, your mind was never the starting point. Your body is the doorway, and your sacrum is the key. Sway, spiral, pulse, and let the field respond.